So hello and welcome to Sacred Science Sunday. I am super excited to welcome Nick Meador, the owner of Soul Lift Cacao. He is joining us from California, where he lives, and local time is closer to 111. So that was why I pushed back a bit today. I first connected with Nick when he was in the Detroit area facilitating group meditation, and he has since become this amazing subject matter expert in cacao and is joining us today to share some wisdom on that, about the origins and the science of cacao, and really just so excited and overwhelmed to have him on the call today. So Nick, could you start with any other introduction you have for yourself and maybe some basics on cacao?
Sure. Thanks, Holly. Great to be here and to speak live. I actually just moved to Oregon. That's one recent change at the right around the new year. So moved myself and my business Soul Lift Cacao to Portland, Oregon. And I've been working with cacao for 5 years now. It really changed my life. I was dealing with chronic fatigue syndrome starting in 2011 and was trying everything: Western medicine, naturopathic, homeopathic, shamanic, just across the board. And some things helped a little bit, but nothing was really clicking. I kept cycling in the like crash and burn with fatigue and body pain. And then in 2015, I was at an event where somebody hosted a cacao ceremony with Guatemalan uh, artisanal cacao, and I felt skeptical, but I decided, it's happening at, like, right next to my camp, and I might as well just try it out. It was free, and it blew me away. I didn't totally understand it at the time, but looking back, it was clear that that was a turning point in my life and a turning point in that struggle with chronic fatigue syndrome. It's not like cacao cured me. I don't use that term for it, but in terms of the pieces of the whole, really, like, lifestyle, nutrition, and self-management uh, tools that I ended up bringing in, ended up making a difference. Cacao is definitely the thing that had one of the biggest impacts in my life.
That's amazing. And yeah, I can completely relate to like the fatigue. I'm Anybody who knows me knows I drink a lot of coffee,
Uh,
and just, a desire to want to get out of that and to feel relief is really quite amazing. And I know it's just kind of taken off to be is it safe to say like the center of your life at this point now. So
yeah,
for those who are maybe newer to it, could you explain like the difference between cacao and chocolate,
yeah,
maybe how like the nibs versus ceremonial?
sure. Yeah, it's very complex because cacao is the original form of chocolate. So cacao, that's short for Theobroma cacao. That's the name of the tree that it grows on, which is about the size of an apple tree. A lot of people have seen, apple trees, but the way cacao grows, it comes in a pod, which grows all over the tree, not just on the ends of the branches, but even on uh, the trunk of the tree too. So a pod gets opened, and there are seeds coated in a white sticky pulp, and all of that just gets dumped into wooden vats for the fermentation process. The pulp actually fuels the fermentation. The natural sugars in there combined with the oxygen in the air. So anything that becomes chocolate or even cocoa, like what we know as hot chocolate packets, all go through that process of fermentation, drying either out in the open sun or sometimes in an oven in more modern settings. After the drying, then there will be some kind of roast. Like yeah, most of what becomes chocolate now has been roasted in a propane oven. But what I consider ceremonial cacao, uh, and what I think, is my understanding, having talked and developed relationships with Mayan indigenous people that I now source from, true ceremonial cacao has the what we call cacao beans, but they're actually those seeds from the pod, toasted over a wood fire, and then the flavor of the wood smoke gets into the beans. The energy of it even is just in a mysterious way different than if they are roasted in a propane oven. And that then there's a skin that has to get peeled off those beans, they get ground down into what we call paste, which is the full content of the seeds. It's like it's about half and half carbohydrates and fat. So there's a little bit of protein maybe, but and we can talk more as we go on about I think of cacao in terms of, on the one hand, the superfood side of it, and then on the other hand, the plant medicine side of it, the more spiritual side of it. But the world still thinks of chocolate as a snack or even like a junk food, because there's so much processing that comes after that point in the commercial chocolate world. It gets heated to really high temperatures, diluted with sugars and other artificial additives, flavors, and things like that. And that's the unfortunate reality still of of what the world really knows about chocolate. The world doesn't even really know much about cacao yet. The term cocoa comes when the cacao butter is removed from that paste after the first grind. So cacao has most of the natural healthy fats removed, and it gets processed with alkali because the powder is easier to transport, basically. So that's the Europeans developed that method in the 1800s, because then they could transport that material, cocoa, back to Europe and not have to worry about melting. And that's when then they developed the methods of making tempered chocolate. When we see a chocolate bar, it's got usually like a smooth appearance. That comes from a process called tempering, which unfortunately, it's like so far removed from the original magic of cacao.
Yeah, a lot of like chemical processes, it seems, that change the both like physical component of the product, and then maybe the spiritual ties that go with having something that has truly been cared for. So I know a little bit about ceremonies, but you are definitely the expert here. For most facilitators, that's sort of part of ceremony too, right? Is to understand the difference, the origin, the love that goes into it. Could you speak a little bit to that, sort of the intention that gives cacao the spiritual charge and zell that we can feel from it?
Sure. Yeah. It's not actually possible to say if somebody is leading a cacao ceremony what their level of training or experience, or if they've traveled to Central and South America. It's all kind of a little bit Wild West still. This idea of a cacao ceremony, as far as I can tell from the visits that I've made to cacao farms and the relationships that I've built with, I now work with 4 different groups to source cacao, all in Guatemala. That's just where I ended up developing the deepest connection with the cacao. And 2 of the groups are led by Mayan guides so they're making this ceremonial cacao, and they are hosting ceremonies themselves. But really, as far as I can tell, it's the realm of Mayan ceremonies is actually very big. It's like very complex, and cacao plays a part in that, but it's not this idea of leading an experience with cacao as the central agent of the experience, the way that we are now starting to think about it in the US, and also it's becoming very popular in Europe and Australia and Japan. Those are kind of the big places where cacao is becoming known as this thing that can be used for becoming more in touch with ourselves or doing spiritual self-development work. But yeah, it's a strange time right now, because cacao ceremonies or spiritual events with cacao are becoming more popular, but it's not really possible to know what that workshop or ceremony might involve unless somebody's worked with that facilitator before, or if they explain it really detailed in advance.
Right. Yeah, and I'd imagine too, like as the popularity grows, like a higher attention to ethics and sourcing, and kind of how the supply part is impacted. And it sounds like that's something you've made a mission to be incredibly aware of, to really do your research on where you're sourcing product from and what the lifestyle is like for those people.
Yeah, it's a long-term work that I find I've been selling cacao since 2016, I founded Soul Cacao as an actual food business so that I could sell to people on the internet in 2018. And the longer I work with cacao, it keeps changing my life. And also, I'm just constantly checking with the sources to make sure that what I'm doing feels good to them. So there's that process of consent, really. I develop labels to tell some of the story of where the cacao comes from. Obviously, I did not grow up in those cultures. I have European background, and there are questions kind of always in the field right now of like who is allowed to work with cacao, what's appropriate or ethical. And the bottom line that my sources through those relationships keeps coming up is that as long as people are ethical, as long as people are respectful and humble working with cacao, then anyone has permission to, basically. And it can be as simple as serving people a cup of cacao and guiding them to connect with their breath. That's kind of the most minimal type of cacao ritual that you could lead people through. And even something that simple can actually lead to really profound insights. People getting clarity about something that has been puzzling them, or just a new sense of self-love and compassion, for themselves. It can be really powerful, even though it is gentle and subtle.
I love that. And yeah, it's like easy to put stress on, like and try to put something that is inherently spiritual into a box and give it guidelines, which makes it hard because it just inherently isn't that. But yeah, as you said, like it's sort of the intuitive, spirit-led part of it that can make it really powerful for people. Mm-hmm. And so beautiful too what you shared about labeling, and telling that story through the products, through the experience. So could you explain a little bit of like, I know that there is sort of ceremonial like purpose, then people can also purchase and maybe use it for like a non-ceremonial or home use. Could you maybe like, just discuss the guidelines? Or also I need to just address your cat. What's your
cat
name?
Yeah.
Aw, what a sweet pea.
I'm invading her afternoon nap space. So you you were asking.
That's okay.
Basically using it for more like superfood. I think it's that difference between a superfood and the plant medicine or spiritual side of it. So yeah, a lot of people have heard now about cacao nibs or had them. I mean, you can get organic cacao nibs at the store for $5 or $6 a pound at this point. And so that's part of the confusion, because a cacao nib is basically when the seeds or the cacao beans have been toasted and cracked, so not ground, because the grinding breaks down the natural crystal formations in the cacao bean. But if they're just cracked, then that's what we know as cacao nibs. They're still crunchy, and those are great in smoothies or that kind of thing. It's just that even if it says organic or even sometimes fair trade, it's just not possible to know where exactly it comes from. I mean, it'll say the country that it was grown in, but it's not possible to know how the workers were treated or compensated exactly. It's not possible to know their story and to get that culture, sense of, the culture coming through. So at that point, then it is just sort of stripped. It's like some of the important things are stripped away, and it becomes just this health food, Whereas when it is the cacao that I offer and that I share, I'm not selling nibs right now, because the way that this cacao is prepared by hand at each step and by collectives where people are treated better and paid higher than cacao industry standards worldwide, it becomes more expensive. The product becomes so if I were to sell cacao nibs, they would have to be like $30 a pound. That really speaks to how much more money is being sent back to the source, to Mayan indigenous people. So for example, the cacao paste, the stuff that has been ground, currently starts at $35 a pound, which if somebody hasn't worked with cacao or hasn't been in a cacao ceremony, that might sound like a lot, but and even if they get some cacao paste and just chop it, you chop it with a large chef's knife on a cutting board, and I'll keep that chopped cacao in a jar in my kitchen, and then sometimes I will just put a little bit of that in a smoothie or just nibble a little bit of it. Uh, it doesn't necessarily have to be like a structured long form ceremony to be able to get the benefits of it. But even today, I had a cup of cacao and did a short, like 10 or 11-minute meditation, and that allowed me to follow my breath, to pay attention to my body sensations, and just kind of sense like where is tension in my body right now, and just like watching the flow of thoughts that is there happening that I might not necessarily notice. So cacao can, I think, really deepen those type of experiences, any kind of meditative, introspective experiences. And it sounds funny to say this, but I think there is something medicinal or even healing about maintaining and cultivating that relationship with our body and our subtle energies, and just being more in tune, getting out of our head and all the like thought patterns and the words. uh, yeah, something to me that actually is very core to my idea of spirituality, really. Sometimes, I mean, I also think of spirituality in terms of the beliefs we have about the world and about reality and about how we uh, are supposed to live our lives, like how we get a sense of meaning and purpose. Uh, but then throughout my journey, I would often see people equate spirituality with like blasting off into other realms. It's funny that I've got that like universe behind me, because that's like when I first started my spiritual journey, which was actually years before I found cacao, like 5 or 6 years before. I met a lot of people, and I experienced myself this idea that I needed to like blast into other dimensions to have a spiritual experience. And the part of the benefit of cacao is that it's just a tiptoe. It's not a drug, it's not a psychedelic. We stay pretty connected with our ordinary consciousness, but there's just a very, very slight shift that can bring in different perspective, can deepen that connection with ourselves, but the integration is easier. I find that it's easier to like take a little gem and really easily work it back into how we see ourselves, our identity, so to speak, or make a little change in our day-to-day lives that can bring us more peace and fulfillment, joy.
I love that. It's almost like a spiritual lubricant at home, so to
Mhm.
speak. And that's definitely my routine with it, is to set some special time aside and use it as like a gateway to journaling or meditation. Can definitely make those experiences much easier. The words flow through, the subtle energies are a lot easier to see, and it feels a little bit more like consciousness than um, the vast creative destination that you've described,
Yeah,
through other means.
yeah,
So, just for the science part of it, because I
yep.
know that you know a ton of it, and for our logical, science hungry people that may be watching, could you speak a little bit to kind of what causes this experience, or like how we can understand what's going on physiologically?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Uh, well, the first thing is there's always been this assumption that the stimulating or energizing part of chocolate and cacao is caffeine. And what I've found, I mean, it's still a little bit unclear, but there is a very, very small amount of caffeine in cacao. It might differ based on where it's grown and what the specific genetics of the cacao are. But the main stimulating compound in cacao is actually called theobromine. That's related to the name of the tree, Theobroma cacao, which is actually coming from the idea of food of the gods. It was the Europeans that came in. As far as I can tell, that wasn't something that the indigenous people necessarily called it. I think the Europeans came in, and there was the really, really unfortunate destruction that happened, but then there was also a lot of recording. Yeah, it's unfortunate. I just want to like add this as a side note that um, a lot of the history of cacao got destroyed by the European invaders, really. And then even in recent times, like over the last 100 years, it's been the corporate influence that has really influenced and in a destructive way the ability of the indigenous Mayans uh, to live their spiritual practice with the cacao traditions. It has survived through food, at least, which kind of goes back to what we were talking about. The theobromine is a gentle stimulant, but it doesn't result in like a jitteriness or a crash or craving like caffeine can. And like I can't really have coffee myself. I crash too much and I crave it the next day in a really like withdraw kind of way. That just doesn't happen with cacao. So the uh, next, what I would call superfood aspect of cacao is the antioxidants, actually. And that's something that I think the world is only just starting to realize the actual health benefits of cacao that stem from the antioxidants. And it's complex. It's like I have a science degree actually from a long time ago, but trying to find, I have found some research and tried to find the actual facts to demonstrate that what I've experienced as health benefits from cacao. And from what I can tell, the antioxidants are really the main star as far as the superfood side of this goes. Their polyphenols is the type of antioxidants, and even more specifically, flavonoids are in cacao. So there have been scientific studies that show the effects on the brain. This lowers the chance of somebody having a stroke, lowers the chance of Alzheimer's disease, and just generally like lowers inflammation in the brain overall. And then there are positive effects on the cardiovascular system, reducing clogging in the arteries, for example, and just more anti-inflammatory effects. So, I followed this thread as I was researching and, looking into how many people die from heart disease each year, how many people die from stroke each year. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but we can share that with.
Significant.
It's like enormous amount. And so if there is this food that's been taken for granted because it's for so long been processed into a candy, basically turned into junk food, when the original form of it has these incredible health benefits, I think over the next 10 years, more and more people are going to start to understand that, and also start to understand the value of the small batch, artisanal preparation of cacao. So, I mean, my hope and belief is that 10 years from now, this type of cacao is going to be as big as yoga and coffee.
I hope so too. I've recently received some mentorship to be a facilitator for my area in Metro Detroit. So I'm excited to be an extension of that mission. And, just really so many like incredible things that you shared, like both spiritual wise and health benefits and the cardiovascular aspect. There's a natural vasodilator component to cacao as well, right? Like some.
Yeah, that theobromine does that. It lowers blood pressure and the blood's flowing a little bit more quickly. So I think that combined with the last part I didn't get to is that cacao has iron and magnesium. So iron is known to increase the amount of oxygen being carried through the blood, and magnesium is known to relieve muscle tension. So I've definitely heard reports, especially from women, that cacao seems to reduce the severity of menstrual cramps. And it seems like that's related to the magnesium probably. But then back to the combination of the theobromine and the iron, then it's like we're getting more oxygen to the brain. And some of those studies have demonstrated that there is an increase then in focus. And I've experienced that from how foggy I was when I was dealing with the chronic fatigue issue. Sometimes I couldn't focus at all, or I would have that experience of like something would be on the tip of my tongue and I would lose the thought and couldn't remember it. And that barely ever happens to me anymore.
Incredible.
Mhm.
Well, really good stuff. So could you tell us a little bit about your website and, kind of how people can get connected with your products and incorporate it?
Yep. Yeah. It's soulliftcacao.com. And the way things started was just selling the pure cacao blocks. It comes in, most of them are a 1 pound block, which needs to be chopped and, and then there are directions on every package on how to make it into a drink at home. There, one of the varieties has a ½ pound block, and then there are some that come pre-ground. So it's still 100% pure ceremonial cacao, but it's ground down. It looks like a powder, but it's not a powder because all of the original cacao butter is still in it. It's just a little bit easier for people who don't. Some people don't like chopping with a big knife. But then for other people, it's actually part of the meditation. That's kind of how I am.
I enjoy it, and I would recommend to anybody that's interested, buy the 1 pound block. It's a lot, and you get a lot for your money. Yeah, and there's something special about that intention and the time that it takes for it to not be super accessible.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. So, and then in order to help more people try out this type of cacao, I am starting to make drinking chocolate mixes, which have the ground cacao mixed with coconut sugar and different spices and natural, like extracts, I would say. Yeah.
yes, it is definitely a very medicinal taste for anyone
Yeah.
who has not participated. I like really enjoy some local honey or cayenne pepper.
Yeah.
But troopers out there that enjoy that raw taste too. So very cool. Nick,
Yeah.
do you have anything like locally going on that you would like to announce or promote before we start to wrap?
I don't have any events going on right now. Soul Lift Cacao has a weekly cacao sharing circle that happens over Zoom every Thursday. So it's 3:30 Pacific time. That would be 6:30 p.m. Eastern time. And people don't even need to have cacao to join. Someone could just join with tea or water, but it's a chance to, basically there's an opening little ritual where everyone uh drinks together. There's a little meditation, and then everyone who joins has a chance for like a long form share to talk really deeply about what's going on with them that week. And if they choose, then they can receive reflections or just, yeah, sometimes it's really uh, healing or nourishing just to have somebody reflect back to us what we said without advice, especially. That's something that actually ties into, we haven't talked about the trainings that I offer, but because I was training in all different kinds of modalities for healing and self-development work, both uh, more cognitive or communication practices like nonviolent communication is one, or more embodied practices like breath work and different kinds of movement. I was doing that for yeah, 3 or 4 years before cacao came into my life, and got to see how things are done in different kinds of groups, different self-development organizations, some ways that I really didn't like also. So I started to develop, what that led to is kind of developing my own philosophy for how to create a safe space for a transformational experience. And because cacao is gentle and, is really flexible, actually, there can be a cacao ritual where people uh, share cacao together and then go into any kind of activity. Cacao and breathwork actually go really well together, but cacao and dance events are also very popular. Yeah, even I've been in some cacao and then like creative journaling or drawing experiences. It's kind of, the sky's the limit, but that whole idea of creating a safe container. So to me, that part of that means uh, having some agreements at the beginning, like confidentiality is usually one that I bring in. So like for the sharing circles that happen on Thursdays, those are confidential space where everyone's asked not to take other people's shares outside of the space once it's over. Yeah, but then there's information about those. Right now, it's self-guided trainings. If people want to learn more about those, there's a training page on the website. There's a short introductory course where kind of like a crash course where people can learn how to prepare cacao for others and important things to think about for being ethical and responsible, sharing cacao as outside of its original culture, basically. But then there's a self-guided 10-week course that's a much deeper dive, not just how to make a pot of cacao, but really deepening their own relationship with cacao as a plant medicine. And honestly, a lot of self-development work, how to even like change their own communication style to be yeah, it's a really deep dive, 10-week journey. So if anyone's
Sounds
feeling called to not just share cacao, but to level up their ability uh, to lead workshops and transformational experiences, then it's highly recommended.
Yes, and I would mirror that, encourage anybody who has any kind of inkling of participating, of growing to that next level of group facilitation, make an impact on everyone around you when you're able to lead and share these tools with the community. So definitely give that a peep. I will link hyperlinks to all of these resources if you are watching on YouTube or within the Divine Unity channel, just so that everything is really accessible afterwards as well. Very cool. And for anyone local in Michigan, I have some info on the Divine Unity site about upcoming events, so check there. If you're in the Metro Detroit area and you want to get connected here, once we're able to play outside again, we'll be meeting. Nick, any closing thoughts? I wanted to express, just another wave of gratitude for you taking this time, for you educating, and really, the spiritual devotion that you've made to restoring the origins and the practice and the power of cacao.
Yeah, it's my favorite thing to talk about, pretty much. So, I guess in closing, or yeah, leading towards closing, I'm thinking of just leaving people with the idea of never stop learning about, like, if there's that calling to work with cacao, whether it's by themselves or sharing it with others, to really stay humble. Because like even for myself, I've been working with it now for 5 years, and I keep discovering more about my relationship with it, and also about the bigger uh, cultural historical picture of cacao, which hopefully will start to become more and more clear as the oral histories start to come to the surface. That uh, now that it can, I mean, the internet is helping a lot because, for example, the two Mayan guides that I mentioned are hosting ceremonies over Zoom. So people who follow Soul of Cacao, especially my Instagram page, I link to them, and then if they have an event going on, then people could join that over Zoom and really get that authentic experience of being in a Mayan ceremony.
Very cool. I'm definitely going to connect on some of these resources. I've learned more deeply from someone that you have mentored in the area, Jessica. So give a little shout out to
Oh,
her
yeah.
for, kind of being that branch to your wisdom.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Nick. Very much appreciated.
Yeah,
And thank you for all that you are sharing with community and with this world.
it's an honor. Thank you too.
Well, have a wonderful rest of your day. And guys, check out Nick's website. So much good things there. And take care. Have a beautiful and sacred Sunday.